benefits outweigh costs, BCR under 1, that means the costs outweigh the benefits. And what this also means is that a lower ratio, it indicates that there are either higher costs and or lower benefits, and then the higher the ratio, that would indicate that there's either lower costs associated and or higher benefits. Something else to note is that for each of these segments, we did estimate a low and a high cost estimate. So looking at North Main Street here, you can see that change in the cost estimate, the low cost estimate versus the high cost estimate, results in slightly different benefit cost ratios. So the higher cost estimate has a BCR of 0.78, and then when you actually lower that cost estimate, it gets closer to 1. So just to take a step back here are the benefit cost ratios for all 6 trunk line segments. And you can see that there's some pretty notable variation between the segments. North Main Street, that's the example we were just looking at. It's just a little bit below 1. And for this, the hypothetical concept for North Main Street did yield a lot of benefits. However, it required really significant capital costs due to expensive road reconstruction to bring it up to a state of good repair. So pretty high benefits, pretty high costs. It was near 1. Jackson, on the other hand, is near 0. This is largely because the hypothetical concept for Jackson did not include a whole lot of improvements, but you still have that added cost of ongoing maintenance. On the other end of the spectrum, Huron Street saw the highest benefit cost ratios, and that's largely because it's a shorter segment, so the concept generally were lower costs to make those improvements. And a lot of the benefits had widespread benefits to many residents. So, for example, adding a dedicated bus lane on those short segments of Huron delivers improved speed, improved reliability for riders on several different bus routes while really only touching that one street. So taking a step back again and looking at the potential options that would be available if the city decided to pursue a jurisdictional transfer. Although we had analyzed 6 different specific segments, it's very unlikely that the city could handpick segments and pursue a sort of a la carte jurisdictional transfer, as MDOT is very, very likely to want to retain a complete route in and a complete route out of the city. So in practice, due to this constraint, there's really only 5 options the city could choose to pursue. So the first option that is available is to not pursue a transfer and allow MDOT to retain all trunk lines. Second option available would be to transfer Jackson and a portion of Huron to the city, so that portion of Huron to the west of Main Street. And allow MDOT to retain North Main Street, that eastern portion of Huron, and then an out route through Washtenaw. The next option would be to only pursue the transfer of North Main Street to the city and have MDOT retain Jackson, all of Huron, and then an out route on Washtenaw. Option 4 would be to pursue a transfer of Washtenaw Avenue and Huron east of Main Street and allow MDOT to retain Jackson, Huron west of Main Street, and then North Main Street as they're in and out of the city. And then finally, the last option here is just to pursue a transfer of all trunk lines. So with all that information in mind, if a jurisdictional transfer is something the city chooses to pursue, these are the next steps. Process starts with council, having them provide direction on whether to pursue a jurisdictional transfer, as well as which trunk lines to propose transferring. If it's determined to proceed with the transfer, the next step is to approach MDOT with the proposal. The proposal needs to include a couple things, including the geographic extents of trunk lines the city wishes to transfer, as well as cost estimates of what it would take to bring those trunk lines to a state of good repair. A jurisdictional transfer does require that MDOT brings the trunk lines to a state of good repair, but the exact terms of that agreement are negotiated with MDOT. So in our cost estimates, we found it would cost an expected $82 million to bring all of the trunk lines to a state of good repair for 5 years. However, this value estimate would change depending on which trunk lines are included within the proposal. Again, once a proposal is put together and MDOT is approached, the next step is to negotiate terms with MDOT. It's really important to note that the state of good repair cost estimate included in that initial proposal is really just meant to serve as a starting point for negotiations and may not be the amount that's ultimately agreed upon. But in order for the process to continue, in order to actually go through with the transfer, both parties do need to come to an agreement on the necessary capital improvements as well as the costs associated for all of the trunk lines in question. So finally, once there's an agreement, the next step is to draft a memorandum of understanding. This memorandum, it documents all of the terms of the agreement. It's really essential that this piece is gotten right because the document spells out exactly what you can and cannot expect from the state. Once that's drafted, a resolution is passed in council to accept the terms of the MOU. The MOU is finalized and signed, and then the transfer is complete. So as mentioned in that last slide, one of the most critical parts of the entire process is negotiating the state of good repair costs from MDOT and making sure to include it in the MOU. I just mentioned that we had estimated $82 million for all of the trunk line, but kind of wanted to give an opportunity to lift up the hood and give you a sense of where these numbers come from. So North Main Street, it's an existing program street. These costs were actually pulled from an existing MDOT reconstruction estimate. And then there's added design, construction, inspection costs. Estimates for Jackson, Huron, and Washtenaw, they came from MDOT TIP funding from similar projects. And then all of these values had a 3% inflation escalation added to them to bring them up to $2028. And again, it's possible that MDOT might find these numbers to be high, but ultimately, this is really meant to serve as a starting point for negotiations. Just circling back for one more thing on the benefit cost analysis, we had mentioned earlier that the benefit cost analysis assumes that all of the costs are borne by the city and includes every possible cost in the analysis. However, it is worth noting with the state of good repair funding that there is potential for significant state of good repair funding to come from the state, and it's very likely to be a component of a jurisdictional transfer. So while the state of good repair funding was not included in the benefit cost analysis in the report, we did include a hypothetical benefit cost analysis where the addition of this state of good repair funding is incorporated to offset the capital costs in the benefit cost analysis. And you can see the new benefit cost ratios do change pretty dramatically when those capital costs are offset. So just to wrap up, there's a lot to consider when deciding whether to pursue something like this. On the benefit side, the city would gain complete control over roadway design, maintenance, operations, and function of the road. This could potentially unlock changes that would help the city move closer to a lot of the long-term stated goals, Vision Zero, VMT reduction, carbon neutrality. However, the process does come at a real cost. This includes capital improvement costs, as well as just the ongoing costs and the responsibility of maintaining these additional trunk lines. So with that, I will turn it over to questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Briggs.
I was trying to wait for a second because I already had one crack at this at Transportation Commission. So I have 3 questions, one of which is the same as one that got raised at Transportation Commission. The Jackson Ave cost benefit analysis, one of the reasons that doesn't show as strong of a benefit to the city is because it doesn't anticipate as many changes to the roadway. One of the questions that was raised at Transportation Commission was why it didn't potentially incorporate more changes, in the sense that the Jackson sort of Maple intersection is quite a hefty one, 6 lanes at one point, and so this analysis doesn't sort of include any potential roadway reconfigurations. Has staff had an opportunity to consider those kind of comments that were raised since that discussion?
No, we didn't incorporate any additional. I think it is a fair point that there, especially from the Maple intersection heading west, the characteristic of the road does change quite a bit. However, we're getting close to the edge of the city at that point, and so it's a fairly short segment. So even if there were some additional benefits realized, I don't know if Jake has the same feeling that I would, but I would think that it wouldn't tip the scales largely, because the majority of Jackson is sort of that 3-lane segment or 2-lane segment at parts from the Dexter split to Maple. And that's probably the configuration of the roadway going forward. One thing to note on Jackson, though, is any projects that were already kind of in the queue and programmed, those were assumed to be already complete, isn't the right word, but were already kind of baked in to that project. So Jackson in particular is of importance in this part because council is well aware of the programmed crosswalk improvements. So those crosswalk improvements were already assumed in the existing condition. So those didn't pop up in the benefit side of the equation.
Okay, thanks. And then my second question is around sort of the formula that what to expect here in terms of losing the annual $200,000 for maintenance. I assume that's coming from past experience in terms of how this has been treated in Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids. But and this is negotiations with MDOT. I'm just curious if this is a formula that is sort of been determined by MDOT, or if there's, I can't remember if there was any sort of legislative guidance on this, or if this is something that could potentially be a portion of negotiations in terms of how this is being treated. Obviously, there's long-term benefits to MDOT for getting rid of these roadways and cost savings for the state.
I would just say, this is Dave Reddick, just related to the maintenance costs that you're giving up are what was actually, that you were actually getting paid for the last bunch of years to maintain those trunk lines for DOT, because they own them. So that's what you're giving up. The interesting part is you go through the formulas, and we talked to MDOT, the fact that you weren't going to get any more money on an annual basis from Act 51 was a little surprising. You would think you would get more, but they just have, it's in the report. It's kind of surprising too. They have a one-time, transfer fee that they give you per mile, but that's it. So it's not a tremendous amount that you're getting extra. The big amount is the state of good repair funds. And the way that works is either state DOT has to bring it up to a state of good repair, or they can just give you the funds for you to do it. And certainly that's what you would want, because you want the roads to be very different from the way they are right now.
Right. And I understand that. What I'm suggesting is, obviously this is past practice, but it sounds like this is MDOT's past practice. Is there, it sounds like there's opportunity potentially to include within negotiations, or potentially to create that there should be a different, different cost reimbursement moving forward in terms of Act 51, that our dollars should increase. Obviously, they may disagree with that assessment, but that could be something we might pursue. Is that?
I mean, you can certainly pursue it. I mean, they are pulling it from formulas from the from the legislation.
Okay, so it's legislative.
So, but they just recently made a change in that, so I'm not going to say it can't be changed. Because as we were in the process of doing this, we got one answer, and then we said, well, they just made a modification that it was more of a one-time shot for jurisdictional transfers, which was very surprising to us as well.
Okay. And I can't remember what my third question is, so I will pass it on to others.
Thank you for very much for this information. From what I inferred, just to restate it to make sure that I'm getting it right, the cost-benefit ratio analysis is done by deeming certain community benefits to have a monetary value, and that's counterbalanced against the hard costs that we know we would incur if we took responsibilities for the roadway for their, for bringing them up to a state of good repair, and then I assume some measure for the amount of work, the amount of money that would be required to keep them in good repair going forward, and then ultimately create some again, capital maintenance, capital improvement upstream. Is there any element in the report that has a dollar-to-dollar analysis to it? That is to say, the community benefit costs are real, surely, but they are also not in our, I assume, our major roads fund. For example, they don't show up as actual money in the actual fund from which we'll have to fix the actual roads ultimately. Is that what is the report's teaching as far as that goes?
Jay, could you pull up the slide that had the indirect benefits and because I think that would help.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah, take a moment.
So the only one where there's like the direct monetary benefit is on the street maintenance savings. That's the only one where we can quantify a direct benefit. The indirect, there's definitely benefits to these that can come to the city. Can we put a dollar amount on it? No. So we don't have that dollar amount that's going to come into the city because of this safety, because of this very large public benefit on the safety side that Federal Highway puts a number on, but we can't kind of extend that out to an indirect monetary benefit to the city.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, there are dollar values associated with benefits in the report, and it's broken out line item by line item for each of these benefit categories. But the intention of those dollar values is for US DOT to try and quantify some sort of direct comparison for things that are very hard to quantify. So I don't know that there's any way to sort of directly relate that to offsetting maintenance costs, or if that's what you're asking.
It is. For my part, I'd love this. I would be incredibly excited about this working, but also, we have to think through whether or not it's going to be affordable downstream. And so what I guess I'm hearing you saying is that there are material benefits, but they are externalized if the point of reference are the enterprise funds from which we fix our roads.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I would say too that the costs associated within the benefit cost analysis do include the specific costs for ongoing maintenance and capital maintenance over the next 20 years. So those pieces of it are incorporated into the analysis.
So the costs are internal, the benefits are external.
Mm-hmm. Largely.
Thank you. Councilmember Dish.
Based on the report, the amount of money that we've calculated we would need to do this is magnitudes higher than either of the other cities that have done this kind of transfer and that MDOT's willing to agree to. How realistic, can we realistically expect to get as much as 50% of what we think it may cost just to get to state of good repair? Should we be thinking 25%? In other words, I know I'm asking you to speculate, but it's a big figure, and it doesn't seem very likely that we would even get all of it from MDOT.
I think we're trying to put you in a good negotiating position with what are very realistic numbers. The one thing that bumps it up a lot is the fact that Main Street was already programmed by the DOT. So we just said, well, they were going to spend the money anyway. Now they're not going to have to spend the money. We did bump it up for, design, construction, inspection, and some for inflation. So what they had on their program was not 30 million, but by the time it would have gotten done, it probably would have been 30 million. So that becomes a large part for not that many lane miles. So we basically said, well, you're not doing that project. You just transfer that over to Ann Arbor and they're going to do the right project. So the rest of it, you have roads that are in Washtenaw in rough shape. It is not something that they could put a single course overlay on and it's going to stay for 5 years. So that can't be the treatment that gets estimated. The treatment that gets estimated to bring it to a state of good repair has to be something more substantial than that. And we did the estimate for Washtenaw with that in mind. So these are reasonable estimates given other projects of similar scope per lane mile that were put in place for those roads, and we think it is a good starting point for you to ask for that. Will DOT push back? Yeah, they're probably going to push back, but we wanted to give you something decent to stand on, a decent leg to stand on with these estimates and how we determine them.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but currently, are there other cities pursuing this effort? So Kalamazoo was mentioned, and then was it Grand Rapids? And have they already finalized the negotiations? Are there other cities in the queue?
I believe there are other cities in the queue. I thought Detroit had one that they were proposing, and I thought there was one other that was also in the queue.
In Lansing.
What was the other one, Stacy?
In Lansing?
Yeah.
So given that these are our top, or among the top largest cities in the state, there isn't legislative effort to take a look at this comprehensively as one package, one funding or budget item in the legislature currently?
Do you mean across cities?
Right, across all cities.
I think each negotiation is a different set of considerations, and there are different points in the process. I think Lansing, for instance, has been in this negotiation process for several years already. So I think that would make it difficult.
So across a couple cycles. So even as we begin this, we probably won't see this happen in a couple cycles then. For the cities that have completed this process, how long did it take?
I don't know exactly, or maybe we have it in the report. Jake, correct me if I'm.
No, I think
it's been several years
Oh, 5 to 10.
from
Okay.
start to finish.
we have that table in there for,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to remember what it said. I think it was 5 for one of them. I don't know how long it was for the other.
It was 10 for one and 5 for one. So those are the terms for how
No,
long.
not the terms for the state of good repair. How long it took from the start of the process to the end of the process.
Right. Yeah, I think that's in the report as well. I'll definitely pull it up.
Thank you.
I have a question about the time criticality component. Is there a lot of variability in the potential costs that would, could something happen a year from now that would completely flip-flop or overturn your current benefit analysis and how that looks? Or are these things that kind of have a predictability about them, and so we can feel confident in being able to make a thoughtful decision, and that might take a little time?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that would change dramatically unless the types of improvements that were incorporated into the benefit cost analysis change dramatically. So, I guess if the question is to say if you were to redo this benefit cost analysis in 2025 or 2026 with the same improvements, would it change? It might a little bit, probably not. The baselines are all generally either counts or some sort of crash injury data from the last 5 years over an average. So it has enough sort of baseline data that it's not going to change dramatically in a year or two, and probably not in 5 or 6 years. I think just changes to the actual types of improvements would be what changes the actual analysis.
Inflation has certainly affected things, but it would affect both sides of the equation. Mm-hmm. So the feds would bump up their dollar values of the benefits just as construction costs are going up as well. So
I would actually say there's the possibility that if it was done next year, it would look better on the benefit side, because the US DOT just updated guidance on how to discount future dollars. It used to be 7%. I think now it's down to somewhere around 2%, but when you discount future benefits, it tends to disproportionately bring down the benefit value, because the costs are often upfront and the benefits are realized 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So the higher that discount value is, the lower the benefit value is. So with the updated guidance, it might actually look more positive on the benefit side. But again, we'd have to run the numbers again.
And one thing that I want to kind of add that we didn't, Jake touched on it, but it really was a very important part of this is not all benefits are quantifiable. There's a lot of benefits to being able to kind of write your own destiny, and that your goals, I know the goals of the city are very important. The Vision Zero goal and the VMT reduction. I'm not sure how you do something like that with the state's current policies. You might be able to get the state to change its policies, but with their current policies of trying to move as many vehicles through the city as possible, I think it's going to be hard to meet that one. So we didn't really talk too much about that. I get worried about using the benefit cost analysis as a black box. It's over 1, we should do it. It's under 1, we shouldn't do it. The tool wasn't meant for that. The tool was meant for it wasn't meant for a jurisdictional transfer decision. It was meant for the feds deciding if a project was, worthwhile for the funding or not. So this situation, where you have, part of the money is going to come from the state, part of the money is going to come from the city. And if we only look at the money that's coming from the city, it really kind of screws up the logic behind the benefit cost. It was really meant, doing this analysis was really meant to inform the decision, not to make the decision for you. You really have to look at where the city wants to go. Can you do it with the state owning the roads, and what it's going to cost you? It's going to cost a fair amount of money. And I think that is very important to look at. But I'd be careful of trying to treat this like a black box.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate those final comments. I think those it's really important. I will get on my soapbox for a moment to say it is very frustrating that MDOT and the state are not recognizing and implementing these same values across every single city in the state deserves to have streets that are built safely, that are built for all users, not just folks who are in cars. We know very clearly that Ann Arbor residents have shared what their values are. It is not questionable what our values are. They want their kids to be able to walk safely to school. We care about affecting climate change. We want our citizens to be able to be healthy. These are established values and longstanding plans. We cannot accomplish our land use goals without a transportation system that supports them. So the question for me is not. I concur with the Transportation Commission that we must begin negotiations with MDOT, and we talk about this being a starting place. This is a very fair starting place. If anything, the state should be giving us more money because they will save in the long run. But I think that we deserve to see where negotiation takes us because our roads should work for everybody in our community, and currently they're killing us.
Further questions? Oh, got one more question. Councilor Song.
So I'm curious as to county-wide efforts. So we've talked about municipalities being interested in taking over MDOT trunk lines. I'm really sorry. I'm not on Transportation Commission, so this might have already been covered. But is there interest from counties to coordinate this effort so it's not just left to municipalities alone? And I mean, is this a conversation that at least, or is it really up to cities to advocate for their state representatives to have a better conversation with MDOT?
I think it would need to come from whichever entity would take the jurisdiction. So we've seen Traverse County had pursued a jurisdictional transfer, but it was for one of the roads that they owned or wanted to own. It would have been their jurisdiction after the transfer. I don't think that they went through with it, and I don't know why, but I have not seen a county try to coordinate jurisdictional transfers on behalf of multiple agencies.
And I'll just jump in there too that, for us and Washtenaw County Road Commission, I mean, we have our roads, they have their roads. I find it hard to see why the county would be interested in getting involved in a jurisdictional transfer, situation, within the city.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess what I was just trying to map out are these possibilities to have this conversation as often as possible. If we're just repeating ourselves over and over again, where are our allies and partners on this? So I guess we'll have to talk to other cities. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Mahoney? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Watson.
So we talked about, so I'm seeing on your slide, right, that the only contemplated direct dollar savings are these street maintenance savings. Can you talk a little more about the factors that go into that? Because is one of the factors perhaps if there's a dedicated bus line or something that you're having the fewer vehicles miles traveled around along the corridor, and then perhaps less wear and tear on the roads? Is that sort of outside, what, how do these factors like transit, these ideas of the dedicated bus lines, and even, the more aggressive ideas of road diets and different configuration changes, are they calculated into the street maintenance savings?
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's a direct, within the benefit cost guidance, there's a direct calculation for VMT reduction equating to $1 per year reduction in street maintenance. And then specifically with the Main Street segment, I think the hypothetical concept went from 3 or 4 lanes down to 2 lanes and a turning lane. So reduction in lane mileage over before and after the project. And I would say too that the street maintenance saving benefit was just meant to be maintenance savings that are realized through changes in the roadway. On the cost side, and this is where it gets a little confusing, there was also a maintenance cost side. So what the ongoing maintenance and the capital maintenance would look like for the new concept.
Thanks. Right. Yeah, I know. I guess my only question that I had in the start of that, but is it even with a sort of a dedicated bus line increasing the transit utilization around, take like the Washtenaw corridor, we're not directly drawing the line that would save on the cost side of the equation, because taking the cars off the road there would damage the road less. That's because of their kind of transit vehicle, because they're consumer sort of vehicles. It's not, it's not considered to be damaging the road, or, is that factored in at all, I guess?
Well, I would say that a lot of these benefits were based off of existing research of before and after studies and what VMT or mode shift looks like. So looking at before and after treatments of dedicated bus lanes, dedicated bike lanes, how many more people do you expect to transition modes? And then what does that resulting citywide VMT reduction look like? And so the estimated mode shift then leads into what the estimated citywide VMT reduction would be. And so maybe it's not necessarily that there's street maintenance savings because there's less people driving in the bus lane, but you might have reduced however many trips off of Ann Arbor roads writ large, and there's VMT reduction savings to street maintenance savings because of VMT reduction citywide, and that's attributed to mode shift because of that particular investment.
Okay, no, thanks. That really clarifies it, and that helps answer my question. Thank you.
No problem.
Other questions? Mr. Dohoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that I at least make some comments about the staff meeting that we had around this report. We had a same presentation that you saw. It's been a few months now, and it was meant for us to understand, one, what the process was, two, understand the magnitude of the challenge associated with it. And for whatever it's worth, I'll just share the observations that were raised in the staff meeting. Make it a very complicated transaction to undertake, because you're taking values and trying to place a monetary value on what they equate to, and the harsh realities of budgets that deal with actual dollars at the disposal of the city for capital purposes. So the trunk lines, if it were a situation where the trunk lines would be transferred to the city after they had been brought up to the appropriate standard, that's a different conversation. What we're talking about is the transfer may very well take place without that having happened. And so the city would be trying to negotiate with MDOT over, sort of as they're going out the door before the legal transaction is completed, how much are they willing to give the city in order to assist us in bringing the roads up to the acceptable standard. There is clearly a value on the other side of the equation over us having control over the flexibility, over us being able to design our values into the roadways. But prior to getting to that, it's how do you handle that financial transaction? Our understanding in the meeting we had is that MDOT would likely give us sort of a one-time amount of money as they exit. And then from there, it's on the city. So for someone like in my role, it's we're accepting a liability and all that brings with it. So if something happens in the roadway because it's not been sufficiently maintained and the city is now liable because we're the owner, If we want to make some transformation to the roadway, we're now, choosing among priorities as to, are we going to address Washtenaw, are we going to address something else? And the questions that we posed, I'll just speak for myself, did not leave a high level of confidence that a successful MDOT negotiation were viable. Doesn't mean we can't try it, doesn't mean we shouldn't try it. I think we should try it, but we didn't see any indicators that we're going to come out on the other end with a reasonable amount of money to address what would be a very costly capital expenditure. And so as we had our conversation, we felt that it was appropriate to tee up the presentation for you unfiltered. That's why we, the administration, have not communicated to you prior to tonight about the fact that we had a meeting, about the fact that we had concerns, about the fact that we see the capital liability based on how these transactions have gone to date. And there was nothing in any of the other jurisdictions that made, the optimism go up. So for whatever that's worth, you deserve to have the benefit of what our conversation was. And so I just shared that with you.
Yeah, just to mention, none of the cities that have done this would say it was a money-making deal for them. It's not. No one's going to make money by accepting these roads. It's just, how can you change your community? It costs them, but both Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids were happy they did it in the end. So that's just a note that I'd make, and it's definitely not a moneymaker. It's going to cost more. And just to put one thing in perspective, if the state did bring these roads up to a state of good repair, they wouldn't give you anything, right? They would just transfer them over if they were going to be in a state of good repair. So you wouldn't be asking for $82 million. You'd be asking for nothing because they're already at a state of good repair. That's why you kind of wanted, I think your timing may have been before they do the Main Street job and spend all that money to do it in a way that you didn't really want them to do it. You ought to have this conversation, because once they do it, they're not going to give you any money for Main Street.
What was the order of magnitude of the liability for the other examples? Lansing, Grand Rapids. I don't know exactly what measure one would have, but like what lane miles, I suppose.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure. I understand that, we hear that Lansing and Grand Rapids both were pleased that they did it, even though it is it is an aggregate cost, and that makes all this. And I understand that. I'm just trying to determine like how many lane miles were in the lanes that they took over. In this case, I forget precise what it was. It was in a slide earlier, but it seemed material, and I'm wondering what the experience of the other jurisdictions were and how much roadway they took.
I'll have to look back in our report. I actually don't have it up. But I can look while we're talking.
Councilmember Dish.
The chart on page 20 says 12.5 miles for Kalamazoo in 2019. In Grand Rapids, it says 3.6 miles in 2017.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dish.
And so, thank you, Councilmember Watson, for being so thorough as always. I think the thing that it would be great to know, which is, as I understand it, not possible to know because they didn't do a study like we've just had done, but it would be great to know how big the gap was between what their estimated need was for those VMT, for those lane miles, and the money that MDOT gave them. And they got very little money from MDOT in both those instances. But I don't think the gap is known.
Yeah, our understanding is they did not do their own estimate before approaching MDOT.
Okay. Further questions? Comments? My only comment is this: to all, thank you very much for providing the council staff and the community with this information. Staff, thank you for engaging with it as ever and for giving us the benefit of your thoughts and advice. With that, we'll close out this portion of the agenda with great thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers in all instances will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time is expired. When your time is expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone in-house who would like to speak at public comment? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at public comment?
Mayor, I don't have any callers online with their hands raised.
Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Briggs.
Just like to remind folks that they can come out to the 820 Ward 5 picnic from 6 to 7 p.m. tomorrow night. And it's at Vets Park. There's going to be veggie pizza and other treats and fun things happening. Apparently the throne is there to use should you need it. You can bike on over. It'll be fun.
Councilmember Dish.
It's on Wednesday.
And if you don't want to go to the
Wednesday.
Ward 5 A20 party, you can come to the Ward 1 A20 party from 5:30 to 6:30 at Leslie Science and Nature Center. And in addition to treats, we're going to have winged animals. Ooh.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone in the community who already came out to the Ward 3 party that happened yesterday. But I just also want to remind folks that coming up this Saturday, June 15th, is the Ann Arbor NAACP Juneteenth celebration and Community Unity Walk. The Unity Walk kicks off at 10 a.m. from Fuller Park and concludes in Wheeler Park, where there is a celebration from noon to 6. And this year, the City of Ann Arbor is a partial sponsor of that event because we helped to fund them out of our Community Events Fund. So I hope everyone will join us.
Further communication from council. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.